The Captive Queen by Alison Weir. Read by Adjoa Andoh. Paris, 1151. Please God, let me not betray myself. Queen Eleanor prayed inwardly as she seated herself gracefully on the carved wooden throne next to her husband, King Louis. The royal court of France had assembled in the gloomy, cavernous hall in the palace of the Cité, which commanded one half of the Ile de la Cité, on the river Seine, facing the great cathedral of Notre Dame. Eleanor had always hated this palace, with its grim, crumbling stone tower and dark, chilly rooms. Oh, how she longed for the graceful castles of her native Aquitaine, built of light, mellow stone on lushly wooded hilltops. How she longed to be in Aquitaine itself. And that other world, in the sun-baked south that she had been obliged to leave behind all those years ago. Louis looked drawn and tired, his cheeks still flushed with the fever that had laid him low for some weeks now. She did not love Louis, but she would have done much, especially at this time when he was low in body and spirits, to spare him any hurt, and herself the shame and the fearful consequences of exposure. She had thought herself safe, that her great sin was a secret she would take with her to her grave, but now the one person who might by a chance look or gesture betray her and imperil her very existence was about to walk through the great doors at the end of the hall. Geoffrey, Count of Anjou, whom men called Plantagenet, on account of the broom-flower he customarily wore in his hat. Really, though, she thought resentfully, Louis could hardly blame her for what she had done. It was he, or rather the churchmen who dominated his life, who had condemned her to follow a suffocating, almost monastic regime, cloistered from the world with only her ladies for company. For 14 years now, her life had been mostly barren of excitement and pleasure, and it was only in a few stolen moments that she had briefly known another existence, with Marcabrew, with Geoffrey, and later with Raymond. Sweet sins that must never be disclosed outside the confessional, and certainly not to Louis, her husband. She was his queen, and Geoffrey his vassal, and both had betrayed their sacred oaths. Thus ran the queen's thoughts as she sat with the king on their high thrones, waiting for Geoffrey and his son Henry to arrive, so that Louis could exchange with them the kiss of peace, and receive Henry's formal homage for the dukedom of Normandy. This was to be the first time she had set eyes on Geoffrey since that blissful, sinful autumn in Poitou, 5 years before, and she was terrified in case either of them gave Louis, or anyone else, the all-seeing Abbot Bernard in particular, cause to wonder what had passed between them. And there he was, tall, flame-haired and intense, strength and purpose in his chiselled features, controlled vitality in his long stride. He had not changed. He was advancing towards the dais, his eyes fixed on Louis. He did not look her way. She forced herself to lift her chin and stare ahead. He was only feet away from her, and accompanied by his 18-year-old son. His son! Henry of Anjou was slightly shorter than his father, but he more than made up for that in presence. He was magnificent, a young, red-headed lion. His grey eyes outdid his father's in intensity. His lips were blatantly sensual, his chest broad, and his body muscular. His youthful maleness was irresistible, glorious. Eleanor took one look at Henry, and saw Geoffrey no more. There was no doubt at all that her interest was returned, for as Louis rose and embraced Geoffrey, Henry's appreciative gaze never left Eleanor. His eyes were dark with desire, mischievous with intent. Lust knifed through her. She could barely control herself. Never had she reacted so violently to any man. With an effort, she dragged her eyes back to the homage that was being performed. Then watched Henry in the wake of his father, falling to his knees and placing his hands between those of the king.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?